You know what's funny about rich people? They never see the trap until it's too late. We only want important people at our wedding, Rick, not your construction buddies. My daughter's fiancé just sealed his fate with those 11 words. Bradley Whitmore III, investment advisor, third-generation Newport Beach money, standing in my modest Orange County living room Thursday night, dismissing 30 years of sweat and sacrifice. I'm Richard Martinez, Rick to my friends, 52 years old, and I didn't raise my voice, didn't defend myself, just nodded slowly. That calm smile my construction crews know means someone's about to learn a very expensive lesson. See, Brad thought he was talking to some lucky contractor who got above his station. He had no idea the unimportant immigrant he was dismissing owned the relationships that would make or break his perfect $75,000 wedding. 24 hours later, his wedding would vanish. His reputation would crumble, and 125 guests would witness exactly who the important people really were. But to understand how this played out, you need to know how I got here. How a 22-year-old kid from Guadalajara became the man sitting across from Newport Beach royalty, holding all the cards. I arrived in California in 1995 with $500 in my pocket and enough English to order a hamburger. Maybe. My cousin Carlos had written that construction work was booming, that a man willing to work could build something here. What he didn't mention was how they looked at you when your accent was thick and your hands were already calloused from a lifetime of labor. The first job was demolition for a contractor named Sullivan, Tommy Sullivan, Irish guy who'd built his company from nothing just like I planned to. While other workers complained about the heat, the long hours, the way some clients talked down to us, I listened, learned. Every day was a classroom if you paid attention. Tommy noticed. Kid's got something. He'd tell the other foreman. Stays late, asks the right questions, treats every job like it's his own house he's building. By winter, he had me reading blueprints. By spring, I was translating between the Mexican crews and the American clients. By the end of my first year, I was his youngest crew leader. That's when I met Maria. She was working at the bank where I went to cash my paychecks because banks intimidated me and I didn't trust them with my money yet. Every Friday, same teller window, same patient smile as I fumbled through the transaction in broken English. Maria Elena Vasquez, second-generation Mexican-American, college-educated, way out of my league. "You're building the new medical center on Harbor Boulevard," she said one Friday, not asking. "How you know this? My father's the loan officer for the project." He mentioned a young Mexican foreman who impressed the general contractor. She smiled, said he was polite, hard-working, and had the cleanest work boots he'd ever seen. I looked down at my boots. I'd polished them that morning, like every morning. "First impressions matter," my mother always said. "You want to get coffee sometime?" The words came out before I could stop them. That coffee turned into dinner. Dinner turned into long walks on the beach where she taught me English idioms and I told her about the houses I was going to build someday. Houses with strong foundations that would last generations. Houses where families could grow and prosper. We married in 1998. By then, I'd saved enough to start Pacific Construction Group with Tommy as my partner. Our first project was a small office building in Santa Ana, $80,000 contract. I was so nervous I checked every measurement 3 times, supervised every pour of concrete myself. Maria was 6 months pregnant with Isabella when we finished that building. She'd drive by the construction site every day on her way to work, watching her husband build something permanent in this new country. Something that would be there long after we were gone. "Our daughter's going to grow up in a world where her father builds things that matter," Maria said, her hand on her belly as we stood looking at the completed building. "She'll never have to be ashamed of where she comes from." I thought about that conversation a lot over the years, especially on the hard days when clients looked right through me, when permits got delayed for mysterious reasons, when competitors with better English and whiter skin got contracts I'd bid lower on. Maria's faith kept me going. Her belief that we were building more than just buildings, we were building a legacy. Isabella was born on a Tuesday in February 1997. 7 pounds, 3 ounces of perfect possibility. I held her in the hospital room and made promises in Spanish and English both. Promises about the world I was going to give her, the opportunities, the respect she'd never have to fight for because I was fighting for it now. Maria died when Isabella was 16. Cancer. Swift and brutal and completely unfair. The last thing she said to me was about Isabella. Don't let her forget who she is, Ricardo. Don't let this world make her ashamed of being our daughter. I've carried those words for 12 years now. Through Isabella's high school graduation, her college years at UCLA, her first job in marketing, through every moment of pride and every worry about raising a daughter alone. Which brings us back to Thursday night, sitting across from Bradley Whitmore III, listening to him explain why my life's work wasn't refined enough for his wedding. The disrespect didn't start Thursday night. It had been building for months, one small cut at a time, each one designed to make me smaller in my daughter's eyes. Looking back, I should have seen the pattern earlier, should have recognized the slow, methodical way Bradley Whitmore III was erasing my life from his perfect wedding. It began in March when Brad first saw my guest list. 22 names, carefully written in Isabella's neat handwriting. My construction crew foreman, the guys who'd helped me build Pacific Construction Group from nothing. Carlos Rodriguez, who taught me American building codes when I spoke broken English and didn't charge me for the education. Tommy Sullivan, who vouched for me when banks wouldn't look at an immigrant twice, who became my first business partner and remained my closest friend. Danny Morales, who'd worked alongside me for 15 years, whose son I'd put through trade school. These weren't just employees, they were brothers. Isabella had been excited showing Brad the list. "Dad's so proud to share this day with the people who helped build our family business," she'd said, her face glowing with the kind of happiness I hadn't seen since her mother was alive. Brad studied the list like he was reviewing a construction proposal with obvious defects. His expression shifted from polite interest to barely concealed distaste. I watched this transformation happen in real time, sitting at my own kitchen table, while my daughter waited for her fiancé's approval of her father's life. "Dad, maybe we should reconsider some of these invitations," Isabella said finally, her voice gentle but strained. Brad's arm tightened around her shoulders in what looked like support but felt like control. "The Whitmore family has certain expectations." Expectations! That word would haunt me for weeks. Brad nodded approvingly at Isabella's diplomatic phrasing. "It's nothing personal, Rick, but a wedding reflects the families involved. We need to think about optics." Optics. There was another word that would echo in my mind during sleepless nights, as if my life was a photograph that needed better lighting to be acceptable. "What exactly do you mean by optics?" I asked, keeping my voice level. "Well, you have to understand, the guest list sets a certain tone. My family's friends, business associates, they're used to a particular social environment. We want everyone to feel comfortable. Everyone except my people, apparently." By April, my list had been refined. The construction guys were out. Too blue collar for a Whitmore wedding. My poker buddies from the old neighborhood, gone. They might not understand the sophisticated atmosphere Brad's family expected. Even Mrs. Garcia, who'd watched Isabella grow up while I worked 18-hour days building the business that would pay for this very wedding, was deemed too informal for such an elegant affair. "We're keeping it intimate," Brad explained during one of his visits to my house, reviewing seating charts at the same kitchen table where Isabella had done her homework for 12 years. "Just family and people who matter in our circles." I watched my daughter's face during these conversations. Isabella, my pride and joy, the first Martinez to graduate college, who'd given the valedictorian speech at UCLA Business School about the immigrant work ethic her father had taught her. She'd squirm uncomfortably when Brad made these pronouncements, but she never spoke up, never defended the people who'd made her success possible. "Love makes you blind," I told myself. "She'll see eventually. Young people sometimes need time to find their backbone." But it got worse. In May, Brad suggested I might want to upgrade my wardrobe for wedding-related events. He handed me a business card for his family's tailor, a place on Newport Coast that probably charged more for a single suit than most people made in a month. "Nothing offensive, Rick, but you'll be meeting some important people. First impressions matter in my father's business circles. Important people." There was that phrase again, always accompanied by the implication that the people I'd surrounded myself with for 30 years were somehow less than important. I looked at the business card. Gianni's Custom Clothiers. The kind of place where they probably measured you for suits while serving champagne and discussing stock portfolios. "I have suits," I said. "Of course you do. But these events, they're different from construction site meetings." My mother's hosting a garden party next month. Federal judges will be there, senators, established Orange County families. The dress code is more, well, refined. Refined. Another word to add to my growing vocabulary of casual insults. The real slap came during the venue walkthrough at Pelican Hill Resort in June. I'd paid the $750 deposit myself, money I'd earned laying brick in 100-degree heat while Brad was playing tennis at prep school. Money that represented hours of my life, sweat of my labor, sacrifice I'd made gladly for my daughter's happiness. This is Isabella's father. Brad introduced me to the wedding planner, a perfectly coiffed woman named Charlotte who probably spent more on her monthly hair appointments than my crew's made in overtime. He's in construction, the way he said it. Like I built sewers instead of the luxury homes his friends lived in. Like I hammered nails instead of running a company that employed 285 people and had gross revenues of $85 million last year. But here's what Brad didn't know about that resort. In 2019, Pacific Construction had renovated their entire conference center, $1.8 million worth of work. I knew every manager by name, had their personal cell numbers, had saved their reputation when the original contractor walked off the job mid-project. I just smiled and shook hands with Charlotte, who recognized my name immediately and treated me with the respect Brad couldn't manage. By July, the pattern was crystal clear. Bradley Whitmore III was systematically erasing my life from his wedding, and my daughter was letting it happen. Each week brought new adjustments to accommodate the refined sensibilities of Newport Beach society. My business associates were too risky. What if they mentioned construction projects during cocktail hour? My church friends might not understand the social dynamics of an interfaith ceremony at an exclusive resort. Even my brother Carlos, a successful structural engineer who designed bridges across 3 states, was questioned about his establishment in the community. "Is he really established in Orange County?" Brad asked during one of our planning sessions, which had become weekly exercises in diplomatic humiliation. "I mean, civil engineering is important work, but the guest list is getting quite long and we want to make sure every seat counts." Carlos had been designing infrastructure for 25 years, had a master's degree from Caltech, and owned a firm that employed 40 people. But apparently that wasn't established enough for the Whitmores. I started paying closer attention to these conversations, really listening to the language Brad used. He never directly insulted anyone. He was too well-bred for that. Instead, he used phrases like social fit and appropriate atmosphere and complementary guest demographics. It was death by 1,000 diplomatic cuts. The worst part was watching Isabella absorb these lessons. My brilliant daughter, who'd written her senior thesis on economic mobility in immigrant communities, was learning to see her own family through Brad's eyes. I caught her practicing conversations in the mirror, softening her accent, editing out references to our neighborhood, our history, our struggles. "Dad, maybe I should call you Richard at the wedding," she said one evening as we reviewed the final guest list. "Bradley's family is more formal. They might find Rick too casual." Richard. The name on my naturalization papers, the one I used for bank loans and business contracts. But my friends called me Rick. My wife had called me Rick. My daughter had called me Poppy until she was 12, then Dad, then occasionally Rick when she wanted to tease me. Now even that was being refined away. The final insult came 3 weeks before the wedding. Brad arrived at my house with revised seating charts, printed on expensive cardstock with the Whitmore family crest at the top. I found myself at table 11, in the back corner next to the kitchen doors, seated with Isabella's college roommate's parents and a few distant Whitmore cousins who apparently also didn't make the inner circle cut. "It's just logistics, Rick," Brad said, not meeting my eyes as he spread the charts across my kitchen table. "The front tables are for immediate family and key business contacts, you understand." Key business contacts. I'd built an $85 million company from nothing. Pacific Construction Group employed 285 people, had completed 623 projects across Southern California, had gross revenues that exceeded most of the established businesses Brad's family socialized with. We'd built shopping centers, office complexes, luxury hotels, custom homes worth more than most people would earn in a lifetime. My company's logo was on construction sites from San Diego to Santa Barbara. But I wasn't a key business contact. That night, I sat in my study looking at Isabella's mother's picture on my desk. Maria Elena Martinez, the woman who'd believed in my dreams when they were just dreams. who'd worked 2 jobs so I could take the risk of starting Pacific Construction, who'd died believing our daughter would inherit a world of infinite possibilities. "What would you tell me to do?" I asked her photograph. I knew what she'd say. Maria never backed down from a fight when it mattered. She'd stood up to discriminatory loan officers, hostile PTA meetings, every person who'd ever suggested that immigrants should know their place. She'd taught Isabella to be proud of her heritage, to never apologize for her father's calloused hands or her mother's accent. And now our daughter was about to marry a man who saw that heritage as something to overcome. That's when I started making some phone calls, quiet inquiries about Bradley Whitmore III and Whitmore Capital Management. I told myself I was being protective, doing what any concerned father would do before his daughter married into a family he didn't know well. But deep down, I think I was hoping to find something, some reason beyond social prejudice to object to this marriage. What I discovered made my blood run cold and my resolve crystal clear. Tommy Sullivan had connections in private investigation, guys who specialized in financial background checks for construction clients. Within 48 hours, I had a folder full of information that painted a very different picture of Bradley Whitmore III than the one he'd been presenting to my family. Whitmore Capital managed $650 million in client assets. Impressive numbers on paper. But Tommy's guy found some interesting discrepancies in their quarterly reports. Missing client funds, unexplained transfers, a pattern of accounts being moved between different investment vehicles without clear documentation. There were also whispers about Brad's personal habits, regular trips to Las Vegas, mounting debts to high-end casinos, a lifestyle that seemed to exceed even a successful investment advisor's means. The Securities and Exchange Commission had opened a formal investigation 6 weeks ago, though it hadn't been made public yet. Federal agents were quietly building a case. Bradley Whitmore's perfect wedding was happening just days before his perfect world would collapse. But he didn't know I knew. He thought he was marrying into money that would solve his problems. My money. Isabella's inheritance, the future of Pacific Construction Group. The investigation revealed more than I'd bargained for. Bradley Whitmore III wasn't just a snob looking down on immigrant families. He was a criminal hiding behind 3 generations of respectability, using his family name as cover for systematic theft from the most vulnerable clients in his portfolio. The folder Tommy's investigator delivered contained 43 pages of documentation that painted a picture of calculated fraud. Bank records showing suspicious transfers, client complaints that had been quietly settled out of court, SEC correspondence outlining a pattern of unauthorized fund movements. Brad had been stealing from elderly clients for over 18 months, using their retirement accounts as his personal casino bankroll. Margaret Hoffman, 79 years old widow, had trusted Brad with her $400,000 retirement account. Over 6 months, he'd transferred $145,000 to various investment vehicles that turned out to be shell accounts feeding directly into his gambling activities. When Mrs. Hoffman called to inquire about her declining balance, Brad explained it as market volatility and promising better returns if she'd just be patient. Robert and Susan Davis, married 48 years, had saved $350,000 for their granddaughter's college education. Brad convinced them to move the money into a high-yield education fund that would guarantee tuition coverage. Instead, he'd siphoned $185,000 to cover debts at Bellagio and Caesar's Palace. Their granddaughter was starting UCLA in the fall, and her grandparents had no idea their gift was gone. The pattern was always the same. Elderly clients, often immigrants themselves or first-generation Americans who trusted the Whitmore name because it represented everything they'd worked to achieve in this country. Brad targeted people who wouldn't question complex financial explanations, who were intimidated by his credentials and family connections. But here's what really made my blood boil. While Brad was stealing from grandparents to fund his gambling addiction, he was lecturing me about the social appropriateness of inviting honest working people to his wedding. While he was destroying families' life savings for poker chips, he was explaining to my daughter that she needed to distance herself from her father's blue-collar associations. The wedding wasn't just a social event for Brad, it was his last desperate gambit before the FBI closed in. He needed access to Isabella's inheritance, to Pacific Construction's assets, to anything that could help him pay back what he'd stolen before his crimes became public knowledge. Which brings us to Thursday night. The night Bradley Whitmore III made the mistake of showing me exactly who he really was. He arrived at my house at 8:30 p.m. driving his leased BMW and wearing a suit that probably cost more than most of my workers made in a week. Isabella was at her apartment putting finishing touches on wedding favors, blissfully unaware that her fiancé was about to reveal the depth of his contempt for everything she'd grown up respecting. "Rick, I'm glad we can finally have this conversation man to man," Brad said, settling into my living room like he owned it. "There are some things about the wedding that need to be addressed directly." I offered him coffee. He declined, probably afraid it wasn't refined enough for his palate. "I've been thinking about the guest list situation," he continued, "and I realize you might not fully understand the dynamics at play here. This wedding isn't just about Isabella and me, it's about bringing two families together, and that requires some thoughtful curation of the social environment." Thoughtful curation, like my friends were museum pieces that might not fit the exhibit theme. "Tell me more about these dynamics," I said, keeping my voice neutral. "Well, the Whitmore family has been part of Orange County society for 3 generations. We have relationships with federal judges, senators, business leaders who move markets. These people speak a certain language, operate within certain social frameworks. And my people don't speak this language? It's not about intelligence, Rick. Your friends are clearly hardworking, decent people. But there's a difference between knowing how to build things and knowing how to navigate high-level social situations. When Senator Lawrence asks about your latest project, does Carlos Rodriguez know how to engage in that conversation appropriately? When Judge Patterson's wife mentions her charity work, will Tommy Sullivan understand the social cues? The arrogance was breathtaking. Carlos had briefed senators on infrastructure spending. Tommy had been featured in Orange County Business Journal for his company's community involvement. But in Brad's world, their accomplishments didn't matter because they lacked the proper social credentials. "What exactly are you asking me to do?" I said. "I'm asking you to think about what's best for Isabella's future. This marriage opens doors for her that staying connected to certain social circles might close. My family has connections that could benefit her career indefinitely. Certain social circles." He meant my social circles, Isabella's social circles. The people who'd celebrated her achievements, supported our family through Maria's illness, treated her like the accomplished young woman she was rather than a project to be refined. "Brad, let me ask you something. What do you think Isabella sees in you?" The question caught him off guard. "I'm sorry. My daughter is brilliant, accomplished, beautiful. She could marry anyone. What do you think attracted her to you specifically?" He smiled the kind of smile rich boys learn in prep school. "I think we complement each other well. I can offer her entree into a world of possibilities she wouldn't have access to otherwise. Not love, not shared values or common dreams or mutual respect. Access to possibilities. Like Isabella was buying a membership to an exclusive club rather than choosing a life partner." That's when Brad made his fatal mistake. He thought he was talking to a grateful immigrant who should be thankful his daughter was marrying up. He had no idea he was explaining social hierarchy to a man who'd spent 30 years building his own power structure, one relationship at a time. "Rick, I'm going to be very direct with you because I think you'll appreciate honesty. This wedding is about Isabella's future, our future together. The Whitmore family has connections that could benefit her career, her social standing, her entire life trajectory. But that requires us to be strategic about associations. I was an association to be managed. The reality is," Brad continued, warming to his theme, "there are 2 different worlds here. There's the world where people work with their hands and earn money through physical labor, and there's the world where people move money, influence policy, shape communities through intellectual and financial capital. I thought about the medical center I'd built where Carlos Rodriguez's daughter was born. The office complex that housed the nonprofit Isabella had volunteered at through college. The affordable housing project that provided homes for families like the one I'd grown up in. Apparently, none of that counted as shaping communities. "Both worlds are valuable," Brad said with the kind of magnanimous tone wealthy people use when they're being generous to their inferiors. "America needs skilled tradesmen. My grandfather always said that. But Isabella is moving from one world to the other, and that transition requires leaving certain things behind. Certain things. Like her father, like her history, like every person who'd helped her become the woman Brad claimed to love. What exactly are you asking me to do, Brad? I'm asking you to think about what's best for Isabella. Maybe you could host a separate celebration for your people. Something more casual. A barbecue maybe, after the official wedding. That way everyone's included, but in appropriate settings. A barbecue for the unimportant people. After the real wedding. After the important people had finished with their refined celebration. You know what, Brad, you're absolutely right. His face lit up with relief. I am? Completely. This wedding should absolutely reflect the kind of people you and Isabella associate with. Exactly. I knew you'd understand once we talked it through. Oh, I understand perfectly. In fact, I think I understand better than you do. Something in my tone must have changed because Brad's confident expression faltered slightly. Is everything okay, Rick? Everything's perfect, son. You've made everything crystal clear. Good. Good. So, we're on the same page about the guest list adjustments. We're definitely on the same page about who belongs at this wedding. But before Brad could respond, my phone rang. Isabella calling. Dad, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I wanted to check about the flowers for Saturday. The florist needs final confirmation on the centerpieces. Of course, sweetheart. Brad's here, and we're just finishing up our conversation. Oh, good. I was hoping you two could work everything out. I know the guest list has been complicated, but I really appreciate you both being flexible. Flexible. My daughter thought I was being flexible while her fiancé systematically dismantled my life's work and relationships. Isabella, I said, let me ask you something. Do you remember the speech you gave at your UCLA graduation? Dad, I don't think this is the time. You talked about the immigrant work ethic, about how your father taught you that dignity comes from honest labor, that respect is earned through integrity and service to others. Brad was shifting uncomfortably in his chair. You quoted your mother's favorite saying, El trabajo honesto nunca avergüenza a nadie. Honest work never shames anyone. Do you remember that? Of course I remember, Dad. But what does this have to do with wedding flowers? I'm just wondering if you still believe those words. If you still think honest work is something to be proud of. Silence on the phone. Brad was now openly glaring at me. I should let you two finish your conversation, Isabella said finally. I'll talk to you tomorrow about the flowers. After she hung up, Brad's mask of civility slipped completely. What exactly are you trying to accomplish here, Rick? I'm trying to understand the man my daughter is about to marry. The man who thinks her father's life work is something she needs to move beyond. This isn't about your work. This is about understanding social realities. Isabella has opportunities now that she wouldn't have had otherwise. What opportunities exactly? Entry into circles that matter. Connections to people who influence real change in this world. The chance to be part of something bigger than a construction company in Orange County. Something bigger than the company that employed 285 families. Something bigger than the projects that housed thousands of people, that provided medical care for communities, that gave children safe places to learn and grow. Let me ask you something, Brad. What happens when Isabella realizes that the price of entry into your world is denying everything that made her who she is? She won't realize that because it's not true. She'll realize that marriage requires compromise, that building a life together means making choices about what matters most. And you've decided that what matters most is your family's approval. What matters most is our future together, a future that has the best possible foundation. The best possible foundation. Built on the graves of every relationship that had actually supported Isabella's success. After Brad left Thursday night, I sat in my study until 3 a.m. staring at the SEC investigation documents and thinking about my daughter's future. By morning, I'd made my decision. Bradley Whitmore III wanted to play games about who belonged in which social circles. Fine, but he was about to learn that the game had rules he didn't understand and consequences he couldn't imagine. Friday morning, 7:45 a.m. My phone rang while I was reviewing Pacific Construction's weekly reports. Brad's name flashed on the screen. Perfect timing. I always record my business calls. 30 years in construction taught me that people say things, then deny them later. Brad was about to give me the gift of his own words. Rick, we need to talk. His voice carried that entitled edge I'd grown to hate overnight. I've been thinking about yesterday's conversation. Have you? Look, I need you to understand something. This wedding isn't just about Isabella and me. It's about two families coming together. The Whitmore name has meant something in Orange County for 3 generations. I stayed quiet. Let him dig his own grave deeper. My mother is hosting a pre-wedding dinner next Wednesday. The guest list is selective. We're talking about people who've shaped this community. Business leaders, political figures, established families. I see. The thing is, Rick, your people, your friends from the construction sites, they wouldn't be comfortable in that environment. And honestly, they might make other guests uncomfortable too. My grip tightened on the phone, but I kept my voice level. How so? Don't take it personally. It's just reality. Look at the Hendersons. Their daughter married that tech entrepreneur last year. Beautiful wedding, but they kept the guest lists complimentary. His Silicon Valley crowd, her Newport Society friends, everyone stayed in their lane. Their lane. This boy was actually telling me to stay in my lane. Brad, let me ask you something. What exactly do you think I do for a living? A pause. You're in construction. You do well for yourself, obviously. Isabella mentioned you own your own company, Pacific Construction, right? And that's great, Rick. Really. My grandfather always said, America needs skilled tradesmen. You've built a nice business. A nice business. Like I ran a corner store instead of an $85 million construction empire. But this wedding, the people attending, we're talking about a different level of society. A different level of society. The man was literally explaining social hierarchy to me like I was a child who needed basic concepts spelled out. Tell me about this different level, son. Well, there's my father's law partners, federal judges. The Patterson family owns the largest bank in the county. Senator Lawrence will be there. These are people who move markets, who influence policy. They speak a certain language. What language is that? The language of real power, Rick. Old money, established influence. Look, I'm not trying to be offensive, but there's a difference between new money and, well, money that's been refined over generations. Refined money, like wine in a cellar, getting better with age, more sophisticated than the crude cash earned through actual work. So my money isn't refined enough. It's not about the money itself. It's about understanding how to use it, how to present yourself, how to navigate certain social waters. His voice softened, like he was explaining something complex to a confused immigrant. My family has been part of the Orange County establishment for over a century. We know these people. We understand their expectations. And I don't. Honestly, no. And that's okay. You've achieved the American dream. You came here with nothing and built something. That's admirable. But Isabella is marrying into a different world now. A world with different rules. The American dream. He said it like I'd won a participation trophy in a contest that didn't really matter. Different rules. Exactly. Look, Rick, I need you to understand something. This marriage is Isabella's chance to elevate herself, to become part of something bigger than, well, bigger than where she came from. Bigger than where she came from. The words hit like physical blows. Isabella came from love. She came from sacrifice. She came from parents who'd worked multiple jobs to pay for her education, who'd celebrated every achievement, who'd taught her that dignity came from treating people with respect regardless of their bank accounts. But that requires sacrifice. It requires leaving certain things behind. Certain things. Like her father's history. Like the people who'd helped build her life. Like every value her mother had died believing in. What exactly are you asking me to do, Brad? I'm asking you to think about what's best for Isabella. Maybe you could host a separate celebration for your people. Something more casual, a barbecue maybe, after the official wedding. That way everyone's included, but in appropriate settings. A barbecue for the unimportant people, after the real celebration, after the refined people had finished with their sophisticated festivities. And you think this is what Isabella wants? Isabella wants to fit in with her new family. She wants to be accepted, and she will be, as long as we're thoughtful about how we handle these transitions. Handle these transitions. I was a transition to be managed. Brad, I'm going to be very direct with you. This wedding is about Isabella's future, our future. The Whitmore family has connections that could benefit her career, her social standing, her entire life trajectory. But that requires us to be strategic about associations. Strategic about associations. I was an association to be managed, controlled, minimized. After I hung up, I sat in my office for 5 minutes, listening to the recording play back. Every word, every insult, every casual dismissal of my life, my friends, my worth. Brad had just given me 25 minutes of ammunition. More importantly, he'd given me moral permission for what came next. I made the decision at 11:52 a.m., staring at my daughter's graduation photo on my desk. Isabella, valedictorian at UCLA Business School, the first Martinez to wear a cap and gown. I'd worked double shifts for 4 years to pay her tuition, never missing a parent conference, never missing a graduation ceremony. That girl was my everything, but she deserved better than Bradley Whitmore III, and if she couldn't see that yet, I'd have to show her. My phone buzzed. Isabella calling. Dad, Brad said you two had a good conversation this morning. He said you understood about the wedding arrangements. Her voice sounded relieved but fragile, like she'd been holding her breath for months. We definitely understood each other, sweetheart. Good. I know this has been complicated, but Brad's family has certain traditions, and honestly, Dad, this could be really good for my career. His father's law firm represents some major corporations. There could be opportunities. Opportunities. The same word Brad had used. Like marrying him was a business transaction rather than a love story. Isabella, do you love him? Silence. Too long of a silence. Of course I love him, Dad. Why would you ask that? Because love doesn't ask you to be ashamed of where you came from. Another pause. When she spoke again, her voice was smaller. I'm not ashamed, Dad. I'm just trying to fit into his world. And sometimes that means making adjustments. Adjustments. Just like her fiancé said. Honey, let me ask you something. When you bring Brad to our house, does he ask about the photos on the mantle? About your mother's story? About how we got here? Silence. Does he ask about the business? About the people who helped us? Does he want to know anything about the life that gave him the woman he claims to love? More silence. Isabella, a man who truly loves you doesn't ask you to erase your history. He celebrates it. It's not that simple, Dad. His family has expectations. And what about our family? What about our expectations? I heard her crying softly. My heart broke. Dad, I just want this to work. I want to be accepted. Baby girl, you don't need to be accepted by people who don't accept you as you are. After she hung up, I sat there for 10 minutes thinking about the man Isabella was about to marry, a man who saw her father as a liability, a man hiding his own crimes while judging my character, a man who would spend their marriage teaching her to be ashamed of the very strength that made her extraordinary. That's when I opened my laptop and started making calls. First call, Tommy Sullivan, my old friend and private investigator. Tommy, I need everything you can get me on Bradley Whitmore III and Whitmore Capital. Financial records, client complaints, SEC filings, everything. How fast do you need it? By 3:00 p.m. Jesus, Rick, that's pushing it. Push harder. There's a $5,000 bonus if you deliver. Second call, Pelican Hill Resort. Hello, Mrs. Patterson. This is Rick Martinez from Pacific Construction. I need to discuss the Whitmore-Martinez wedding booking. Mrs. Patterson remembered me immediately. We'd worked together on their conference center renovation, a project that had saved the resort's reputation when their original contractor abandoned the job mid-construction. Yes, I know it's short notice. No, there's been a family emergency. The conversation lasted 8 minutes. Mrs. Patterson was apologetic but understanding. These things happened. The $750 deposit would be fully refunded due to the circumstances. She hoped everything worked out for the best. Third call, the resort at Balboa Bay. Mr. Davis, Rick Martinez from Pacific Construction. We did your marina renovation in 2020. Gregory Davis had been impressed with our work. We'd come in under budget and ahead of schedule, a rarity in the construction business. When the original plans hit engineering, problems. My team had redesigned the entire dock system without charging extra. That's right, the one that won the Orange County Construction Excellence Award. I need a favor. The resort had been Brad's backup venue. The Ocean View ballroom he'd reserved for $200 a night suddenly had a plumbing emergency that would require extensive work. Coincidentally, Pacific Construction was the only company in the area qualified to handle the specialized repairs. The work would take at least a week, maybe 2. Davis was apologetic but firm. Safety first. The ballroom would be unavailable for the foreseeable future. Fourth call, Newport Harbor Yacht Club. This one was personal. I'd built their entire clubhouse in 2018, a $2.3 million project that had transformed their facility from outdated to spectacular. When the original contractor tried to cut corners with substandard materials, I'd personally intervened, eating the cost difference to ensure the job was done right. Greg, it's Rick Martinez. I need the Whitmore wedding booking canceled. Commodore Gregory Walsh was a man who understood loyalty. When his clubhouse project had hit permitting problems, I'd personally walked the plans through City Hall, called in favors, smoothed the regulatory path. The yacht club had opened on schedule because of relationships I'd spent decades building. No, I can't explain right now. Yes, I know it's their biggest event this quarter. Greg, trust me on this one. There was a pause. 20 years of friendship, of reliable business dealings, of mutual respect. Consider it done, Rick. The booking's canceled due to unexpected facility maintenance. Full refund. By 2:00 p.m., Brad's perfect wedding venues were disappearing one by one. But I wasn't done. Not even close. At 2:52 p.m., Tommy called back. Rick, you're not going to believe what I found. Bradley Whitmore III is in deep trouble. The SEC has been investigating Whitmore Capital for 6 months. Client fund misappropriation. We're talking $1.8 million in suspicious transfers. Keep going. It gets worse. The guy has gambling debts. Big ones. $325,000 to 4 different casinos. There's chatter he's been using client money to cover losses. My contact at the Bureau says they're building a solid case. When does this go public? FBI raid is scheduled for Monday morning. Arrest warrant signed and sealed. This kid has maybe 72 hours of freedom left. Bradley Whitmore III had 1 weekend left as a free man. 1 weekend to learn what happened when you disrespected the wrong immigrant. Friday, 3:30 p.m. Brad's panic started with a phone call from his wedding planner. I know because Isabella called me 15 minutes later, her voice shaking with confusion and growing alarm. Dad, something weird is happening. Brad just got a call from the wedding planner. Pelican Hill canceled our booking. They said there was a family emergency, but that doesn't make sense. We had contracts. That is strange, honey. I was reviewing Pacific Construction's client list while we talked. 30 years of building relationships about to pay dividends in ways Brad couldn't imagine. And Balboa Bay just called too. They said there's a plumbing issue in the ballroom. Major repairs needed. They're refunding our deposit, but Dad, we're getting married tomorrow. Tomorrow. In all his social maneuvering, Brad had forgotten the most basic rule of event planning. Always have a backup plan. But then again, when you've spent your whole life having things handed to you, you don't develop contingency thinking. I'm sure he'll figure something out, sweetheart. What Brad didn't know, what nobody knew except me, was exactly how deep Pacific Construction's roots ran in Orange County. We hadn't just built buildings. We'd built the infrastructure of an entire community's social life. Every venue he'd considered, every backup location on his list, had some connection to work we'd done over the past 3 decades. 4:00 p.m. My phone rang. Newport Harbor Yacht Club. Mr. Martinez, this is Jennifer from the Yacht Club. I wanted to personally apologize about the Whitmore wedding cancellation. Commodore Walsh explained there were family circumstances. I appreciate you calling, Jennifer. We're refunding the full $8,500 deposit, of course. And Commodore Walsh wanted me to tell you that if you need anything else, anything at all, just call. Gregory Walsh understood loyalty. When his clubhouse project had hit permitting problems in 2018, I'd personally walked the plans through City Hall, called in favors with planning commissioners I'd known for years, smoothed the regulatory path that could have delayed opening by 6 months. The yacht club had opened on schedule because of relationships I'd spent decades building, one honest job at a time. 4:35 p.m. Isabella called again. Now she sounded scared. Dad, 4 more venues just canceled. The Mission San Juan Capistrano, Montage Laguna Beach, the Ritz-Carlton, even that little place in Dana Point Brad's assistant found. They all have different excuses, but Brad says this can't be a coincidence. It wasn't a coincidence. It was a masterclass in leverage taught by a man who understood the difference between inherited connections and earned relationships. Mission San Juan Capistrano. Pacific Construction had restored their reception hall in 2021 after earthquake damage. The event coordinator, Maria Santos, still sent me Christmas cards with pictures of her children. Montage Laguna Beach. We'd renovated their entire spa complex after the 2020 fire damage, saved them $250,000 by working around their peak season, keeping the resort operational while we rebuilt. Ritz-Carlton. My company had installed their new elevator system. The general manager's son worked in my accounting department, had started as an intern and earned his way up to supervisor. Dana Point Harbor. We'd built their new marina office building. The harbor master had become a personal friend over the 2-year construction process. Brad thinks, someone is sabotaging us, Dad. He's talking about hiring a private investigator. That seems extreme, honey. Is it? Dad, Brad asked me something today. He asked if you knew people at these venues, if you had connections. I stayed quiet, letting her work through the logic. I told him you were just a construction contractor, that you wouldn't have that kind of influence. Just a construction contractor. Even my own daughter had bought into Brad's narrative about what I was and wasn't capable of. Isabella, let me ask you something. In 30 years, how many buildings do you think Pacific Construction has worked on? I don't know. Dozens? 623 completed projects, shopping centers, office buildings, restaurants, hotels, country clubs, private homes. We've employed over 400 people over the years. Subcontractors, suppliers, vendors. We've done business with every major construction supply company from here to San Francisco. Silence. When you build someone's dream, Isabella, they remember. When you save their project, solve their problems, deliver on time and under budget, they remember. When you employ their sons, hire their cousins, sponsor their little league teams, they remember. Dad, what are you saying? I'm saying that maybe Brad doesn't understand what 30 years of honest work actually builds. 5:45 p.m. Brad called me directly. His voice was tight, controlled, but I could hear the panic underneath like a crack in expensive veneer. Rick, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be straight with me. Of course. Do you have business relationships with any of the venues we've been looking at? I've done work for various clients over the years. Why? Because 9 venues canceled our wedding today. 9. That doesn't happen by accident. That does seem unusual. Rick, I need to know. Are you interfering with my wedding? The question hung in the air like smoke. Bradley Whitmore III, the man who'd spent months explaining to me how unimportant I was, now suspected I had the power to dismantle his perfect day with a few phone calls. Brad, let me ask you something. Yesterday, you told me I didn't understand important people. Today you're asking if I have enough influence to affect your wedding. Which is it? Silence. I mean, according to you, I'm just an immigrant contractor who got lucky. How could someone like me possibly have connections to 9 different high-end venues? Rick, unless of course you were wrong about what I built here. Unless 30 years of hard work actually earned me something more than luck. I could practically hear him sweating through the phone. Look, if there's been some kind of misunderstanding. Brad's voice was strained now, the polished confidence cracking like cheap paint under pressure. No misunderstanding, Brad. You've been very clear about your opinion of me, and I've been very clear about understanding exactly where I stand. What do you want? There it was. The question that proved Bradley Whitmore III finally understood who held the power in this relationship. I want you to have exactly the wedding you deserve, son. Exactly the wedding that reflects who you really are. Meaning what? Meaning a man who builds his life on other people's money while hiding his own crimes probably shouldn't be throwing elaborate parties. Dead silence. That's right, Brad. I know about Whitmore Capital. I know about the SEC investigation. I know about your gambling debts. I know exactly who you really are. You can't prove anything. Monday morning, the FBI will prove plenty. But don't worry about Monday. Worry about tomorrow, because tomorrow 125 guests are going to discover that the man judging everyone else's worth isn't worth much himself. I hung up. Saturday morning, 8:30 a.m. Brad showed up at my office unannounced. I was reviewing blueprints when my secretary buzzed me. Mr. Martinez, there's a Bradley Whitmore here to see you. He seems agitated. Send him in. Brad walked through my office door like he owned the place, but his confidence was completely gone now. Designer suit wrinkled, hair disheveled, dark circles under his eyes. This was a man who hadn't slept, who was running on desperation and whatever was left of his trust fund arrogance. We need to talk. I gestured to the chair across from my desk. Have a seat. He remained standing, trying to project authority in a room that screamed my success. Awards on the walls, photos of construction projects spanning 3 decades. a framed copy of my first building permit from 1995. The American dream made tangible, one honest job at a time. You think you're clever, don't you? I leaned back in my chair. I think I'm thorough. 13 venues, Rick. 13. Every single backup option we had, gone overnight. That's unfortunate. Cut the act. You did this. Used your connections to shut down every venue in Orange County. Brad, yesterday you told me I was just a lucky contractor. Today you're crediting me with controlling every venue in Orange County. Make up your mind. He started pacing, caged animal energy filling my office. This isn't a game, Rick. Isabella is devastated. Her dream wedding is ruined because you can't handle being excluded from the cool kids' table. Excluded from the cool kids' table. Even facing complete disaster, he was still talking to me like I was a child who needed to learn his place. Sit down, Brad. Something in my tone made him freeze. I said, sit down. He sat. I opened my desk drawer and pulled out the manila folder Tommy had delivered. 43 pages of SEC investigation documents, bank records, client testimonies. Brad's eyes went wide when he recognized the federal letterhead. Let's talk about games, son. You've been playing a big one. $1.8 million in client funds, 14 separate transactions, all to cover gambling debts at Las Vegas casinos. His face went white. Margaret Hoffman, 79 years old, retirement account. You transferred $145,000 to your personal trading account, told her it was a high-yield investment opportunity. You can't prove. Robert and Susan Davis, both in their 70s. Their granddaughter's college fund, $185,000. Gone. I slid another document across the desk. Bank records showing wire transfers to Bellagio Casino, Caesar's Palace, MGM Grand. Here's what I find interesting, Brad. You spent months telling me about important people, about refined money, about social standing. But the whole time you were stealing from elderly clients to fund your gambling addiction. It's not stealing. It's temporary liquidity management. Temporary liquidity management. Even facing federal charges, he was speaking in euphemisms. The FBI doesn't see it that way. Neither do your clients. Neither do the federal prosecutors who've been building this case for 6 months. How did you get this information? Same way I got the venue cancellations. Relationships, Brad. Real relationships built on trust and respect, not inherited connections or social climbing. He leaned forward, desperate now. Look, Rick, maybe we can work something out. The wedding, Isabella. She doesn't deserve to suffer for our disagreements. Isabella deserves better than you. I love her. You love her money. My money. You thought marrying Isabella would solve your financial problems, give you access to Pacific Construction's assets, let you pay back what you stole before anyone noticed. His silence confirmed everything. Here's what's going to happen, Brad. Monday morning, FBI agents will arrest you for wire fraud, embezzlement, and securities violations. Your assets will be frozen, your reputation will be destroyed, your family name will be synonymous with financial crime. I stood up, walked to the window overlooking the construction yard where my crews were already working despite it being Saturday. Honest men doing honest work. And Isabella will discover she dodged a bullet. Instead of marrying a criminal, she'll be free to find a man who deserves her. Brad stood up slowly. This isn't over. You're right. It's not over. It's just beginning. In 6 hours, 125 guests will arrive expecting a wedding. They'll learn exactly who Bradley Whitmore III really is. You bastard. I turned back to face him. I'm an immigrant who built an empire through honest work. You're a trust fund criminal who destroyed elderly people's lives for gambling money. Which one of us is the bastard? He lunged toward me, but stopped when my office door opened. Tommy Sullivan walked in, followed by 2 men in dark suits. Rick, I'd like you to meet FBI Agent Rodriguez and Agent Thompson. They're here about Mr. Whitmore. Brad's lawyer must have told him to expect this because he didn't look surprised. Just defeated. Mr. Whitmore, Agent Rodriguez said, his voice calm and professional. We'd like you to come with us for questioning regarding your client accounts at Whitmore Capital. This is harassment, Brad said, but his voice lacked conviction. I want my lawyer. You can call your lawyer from the federal building. Right now, we need to discuss some irregularities in your SEC filings. As they led Brad away in handcuffs, I thought about the 125 guests who would arrive in a few hours expecting a wedding. They deserved to know the truth about the man they'd come to celebrate. Saturday, 4:15 p.m. The Martinez family estate was buzzing with confused energy. Against all odds, Isabella had made a decision that surprised everyone, including me. The wedding was canceled, but the gathering would go on. 125 guests have traveled for this day, Isabella said, standing in our living room still wearing her wedding dress, but with a different look in her eyes. They deserved to know the truth. My daughter had spent the morning at the federal building, not as a bride preparing for her wedding, but as a witness in her fiancé's criminal investigation. She'd seen the evidence, heard the victim testimonies, finally understood what kind of man she'd almost married. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you all for coming, Isabella said, standing on our back patio with the Pacific Ocean sparkling behind her. Her voice carried across the gathered crowd with a strength I hadn't heard in months. I know you're confused about the venue changes, the last-minute messages. I want to explain everything. I watched from the kitchen window as our guests assembled on the lawn. Brad's family sat in the front row, Patricia Whitmore pale and furious, flanked by federal judges and old Orange County families who were quickly realizing they'd backed the wrong horse. My construction crew stood in the back, uncomfortable in their borrowed suits but loyal to the end. Senator Lawrence was there, looking increasingly nervous as news vans gathered outside our gate. The story was already breaking on social media. This morning, I learned something about the man I was supposed to marry, something that changed everything. A black Mercedes pulled up the driveway. Brad, released on emergency bail, stepped out with his lawyer. His face was haggard, his expensive suit wrinkled from federal processing. He'd posted $400,000 bond, money that probably belonged to his victims. "Isabella, what are you doing?" Brad called out, pushing through the crowd. "Telling the truth." He reached the patio, his lawyer whispering urgently in his ear. "This is a private family matter. You don't need to—" Bradley Whitmore III stole $1.8 million from elderly clients to fund his gambling addiction. The crowd went dead silent. You could hear the ocean waves crashing against the rocks below. Patricia Whitmore stood up. "This is outrageous. How dare you make such accusations?" "FBI agents arrested him 6 hours ago," Isabella continued, her voice steady. "Wire fraud, embezzlement, securities violations, 11 families destroyed so he could play poker in Las Vegas." Brad's face was crimson. "Isabella, you're hysterical. The stress of the wedding, the venue problems—" "But there were no venue problems, Brad. My father canceled every booking because he discovered what you really are." Every head turned toward me. I stepped out onto the patio, carrying the manila folder that had started this whole chain of events. "Margaret Hoffman," I said, my voice carrying across the silent crowd. 79 years old, trusted Brad with her retirement account. He stole $145,000 for a weekend in Vegas. Brad's lawyer grabbed his arm. "Don't say anything. Not a word." Robert and Susan Davis. Married 48 years. Their granddaughter's college fund, $185,000, spent on blackjack tables while they ate pasta every night to save money. I pulled out the bank records, held them up for everyone to see. Senator Lawrence was edging toward his car. Several other Whitmore family associates were checking their phones, probably calling their own lawyers. "But here's what Brad really thought of all of you," I continued. 2 days ago, he told me he only wanted important people at his wedding, said my construction buddies wouldn't understand the language of real power. I pulled out my phone, connected it to the portable speaker Isabella had set up for wedding music. Brad went white. "Rick, don't. The language of real power, Rick. Old money, established influence. Look, I'm not trying to be offensive, but there's a difference between new money and, well, money that's been refined over generations." Brad's recorded voice filled the garden. Every word, every insult, every casual dismissal of the life that had built Pacific Construction. The Whitmore section was nearly empty now. Old Orange County money had vanished like smoke when the truth came out. But my construction crew, my unimportant construction buddies, surrounded Isabella with support and love. Patricia Whitmore stood alone by her Mercedes, her 3 generations of refinement unable to shield her from her son's crimes. "Mrs. Whitmore," I called out as she reached her car, "you were right about one thing. Some people never learn their place in society. Your son never learned that his place was as an honest man, not a criminal who preys on the elderly." She drove away without a word. Isabella found me by the ocean an hour later, as the last guests were leaving. "Dad, do you think I made the right choice?" I looked at my daughter, beautiful, strong, finally free from Bradley Whitmore's manipulation. Honey, you made the only choice that lets you look yourself in the mirror. So what happens now? Now we get back to being a family that earns respect instead of demanding it. 3 months later, Bradley Whitmore III was sentenced to 8 years in federal prison. The 11 families he'd robbed received assistance from a victim fund that Pacific Construction helped establish. Isabella officially joined the company as Director of Community Relations. Her first project, affordable housing for elderly immigrants, people like the ones Brad had preyed on. Sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. Sometimes it's just living well, building honestly, and teaching your children that respect is earned one relationship at a time. The important people understand that. The rest never did matter anyway.